Our scientist this week is Dr. Nidhi Santen, a family oriented shopping lover who is studying sustainable ways to power our world. She loves games, drawing, shopping, advocating for women's rights, and nature and the outdoors. She wants to know, what are the different ways we can make and use electricity? Can we develop cleaner, more sustainable energy sources? She studies energy system science. Energy system scientists study different sources of energy, such as wind, solar, and fossil fuels, and their impact on the environment, communities, and the economy. Dr. Santen works in a research institute where many scientists and engineers collaborate. She spends most of her time working on a computer, using math and models to help her understand how electricity can be made, moved around, and used. We use energy all the time to power our stuff and keep the lights on, but all of that energy has to come from somewhere, and it's important to think about those sources. Dr. Santen studies how different sources of energy can be used to meet our needs for electricity responsibly. Because her science impacts all of our lives, it's also important for Dr. Santen to think about the role that education, policy, and culture play in getting her research into the real world. Her path to science: playing outside. She grew up in a traditional Indian home and is a first generation American. She was quiet as a young kid. Her family house backed up to the woods, so she and her siblings loved running around. She loved being outside and decided to informally join the Boy Scouts instead of the Girl Scouts because they spent more time outside. She was always drawing with colored pencils. She loved to draw and create much more than reading books. Beyond maps. She went to college at the University of Illinois and studied geography. She thought it was all about maps and locations. Her classes turned out to be much more about resources, environment, and communities. She took an environmental ethics course and loved it. She went to the teacher and said, "Whatever this is what I want to do." The teacher convinced her to intern in DC so that she could learn more about how environmental policy works, learning how the laws are made. She moved to DC to explore how lawmakers make laws about the environment. She fell in love with the idea of clean energy, seeking out responsible energy sources, and saw it as a way to protect the environment that she loved so much. She decided she wanted to be part of the solution by studying new ways to produce and use clean energy. Going backwards, she realized she had a lot of gaps in her knowledge. She looked into graduate programs only to find that she didn't have the background in math and science that she needed. She decided to go back to community college classes during the summers and spent the rest of her time working to pay the bills. After filling in her gaps by going back to school, she went to Indiana University for two master's programs in environmental policy and atmospheric science. Getting electric. She found electricity particularly interesting because it touches so many aspects of our everyday lives, from flipping a switch in our homes to the air we breathe outside. She went to get her PhD in engineering systems at MIT. She now works on sustainable energy planning. She studies how we can build our future electric power systems so that we can live how we want and also protect our air, water, and earth. Her advice: learning a new skill is always hard. You fall off your bike dozens of times before you learn how to ride. Science is just the same. You have to practice and fall until you get the hang of it. Find the right teachers. Some teachers will really get you. You can seek out the support of teachers and other adults who recognize your strengths and make time to support you. There are lots of adults excited to help young people, but sometimes you have to look for them. Many scientists felt like they weren't good enough. When I went to my orientation at MIT, half of the students I was with admitted that they felt like they didn't belong or they weren't good enough. The feeling of not being good enough may not ever go away, but the important thing is what you do in spite of that, and knowing that you aren't alone and you can do this. And her final quote: being a scientist is about not being afraid to ask questions.